wonder if anyone has any specific questions they want to ask Jenny based on that sharing.
I was gonna ask, after your long career in leadership, what does leadership mean to you now? And how do you know when you've been a good leader?
Ah, what fantastic questions. Thank you very much for that. Well, I would say a couple of things. So I think leadership now means to me about being both a supportive leader. So how do I really nurture all the brilliant people that I work with, get the most out of them in terms of their experience and their skills, but enable them to be really successful. And there's lots of this leadership style has lots of definitions such as servant leadership, but really it's a coaching leadership style. It's about really bringing through expertise because I think leaders that think they can do it all on their own are deluded. We definitely can't. We really need that insight from others. But I think the other thing I've realized is you have to be visionary. You have to inspire people as well. If you're just sort of looking down and bringing people with you and being supportive, but you don't set out a direction of travel, a future, something to excite and motivate people so that they feel galvanized in supporting the organization's goals, then it won't work. So I think the two things really need to come together. And I just think it's about enabling the organization and the people in it to be their very best and to deliver on their mission in the best way possible. I think the second part of your question was what I've learned. Is that right? Sorry. Yes. How do you know when you've been a good leader? I think that's quite challenging. I would say it's a lot about feedback. I don't think you can make that judgment yourself. And if you do, again, I imagine you're not being that effective. I think it's really important to ask people, am I supporting? What do you need from me? And to check people really understand that point around vision. Is it coming across effectively? Do people get it? Are they engaged? Are they involved? Do they feel empowered to be their best selves? What's their career vision, trying to be that ambassador for them and finding out that it works. And one of the really big times I knew I'd been effective in a sort of big leadership transition in my last organization, I was running an organization working in the FE sector, and I did a lot of work on organizational values and reframed the values. And I knew it had been effective when people joined our organization because of our values. And in fact, we then got assessed as one of the Times best companies to work for, and we were in the top 10. And a lot of that was because people felt really heart and soul connected to the organisation and our mission, which was fantastic. And I sort of took that as a sign of good leadership in action. Thanks for the question.
Hello, Jenny. So how do you, so like, I want to ask a question about like what you think about the future of the energy sector and industry holds. So what trends or like features do you think that the energy industry will hold in probably 5 to 10 years? And how do you see the energy sector probably like growing or declining in the future?
Yeah, another great question. I think that there is a really positive future for the energy sector as we see it now. I think we have a government who are committed with policies and plans to invest in this, not just for this parliament, for the very much long term. They're really keen on enabling us to make that clean energy transition in a managed way. I think there's going to be a lot more continued investment, which is brilliant for the longer term. I think there's going to be quite a lot of change around how we engage in and deliver. And we're really seeing this, and it comes back to the conversation on AI. I think quite a bit of the work we do is around advice, and obviously that's really changing. The future of advice in every area of life is massively altering. So it's about how do you actually provide that specialism and that value? What sort of other input do we need to give people beyond sort of generic advice they might find online? I think that the sector is going to grow because I think there'll be more and more jobs in green energy, clean energy, and we just need almost the innovation to catch up to enable us to get there in terms of seeing all those jobs being realised. But I think we're seeing new jobs appearing all the time actually in this space. So I think it's really fascinating to explore and uncover what that's going to look like for us. I can see there being a lot more kind of interesting innovation itself. I think we're already again seeing really sort of cutting edge developments in how we might solve some of the really challenging crises or issues that we're facing in trying to work towards decarbonising homes and the planet and working towards net zero. So I think we're seeing a lot of change. I think it will be very sort of rapid change as well. I think we're seeing actually a lot of developments unfolding now. We've got this really clear plan to invest in this space. And I think it'll be a very different dynamic in terms of the roles that are available, particularly again, linking back into further education. I think we're seeing a lot more opportunity coming up, moving from traditional manufacturing to thinking about a number of aspects we can control, such as waste, reusing materials, and thinking about kind of different skills that need to be developed in this space. So I think there's a positive future. I think right now we are facing a challenge in some of the narrative. I think we've been hearing this in the public space. Not everyone is fully behind working towards net zero. And I think we are seeing that being, it's a difficult discourse for those of us that feel the evidence has been proven, the case has been made, and we're working hard to make a difference. I think for myself, the evidence, the trajectory speaks for itself in terms of what we're witnessing more widely. So I think the case is there. I think we just have to kind of really maintain and hold the belief, because I think we've got to stay the course, and more people that join the sector and work in the space, the better, because we need all the bright minds on the solutions.
Hi, Jenny. Thanks for this. It's been really insightful. I had a question about, through your role at the Energy Savings Trust, how do you feel collaboration and the merits of it has evolved through the time you've been there? And thinking about that not just on a personal level, like within the organization, but how the organization has worked with other organizations, and whether that's very much regional or global. And it would just be great to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, great question as well. And I think collaboration is one of the biggest keys to unlocking how we evolve any area of work in the future. I think as an organization, I mentioned earlier, we've been around for, I think, 34, 35 years, long time. And probably we were one of the few organizations at that time sort of starting to lead work in the space. But a lot more organizations have come up, and there are organizations that offer whole solutions. And then we've got lots of really interesting startups who are offering just one kind of particular digital element of some of our work. I think we can't be closed off to collaboration. I think it's absolutely essential. We don't have the whole answer. No one does. So how do we sort of build consortiums, which is some of what we do more and more now, I'm finding, particularly the bigger the opportunities are, the bigger the challenges, the bigger the solutions we need to design. So we do some great work with some really fundamental large organizations. We work with EY on some of our kind of solutions, because they can bring really great governance and technical solution design to help us. And we bring that expertise and that knowledge of the consumer. And so that works really well. There's lots of other consortium partners we work with, particularly from a community energy perspective, like CSE, which is fantastic. I think more and more as well, the organizations are coming together in network groups. So I mentioned the power of networks. You might be aware, one of the really important organizations or suite of organizations that work in this space now will be through local authorities and through combined and strategic authorities. And they're a really key vehicle for delivering a lot of the government agenda. We're really delighted. We work with UK 100. They're a sort of an organization body that works across sustainability and climate change with those local authorities to try and bring together kind of common issues, common challenges, so we can look at solution design together. And I think we're seeing this more and more. We're really fortunate to be members of a number of different bodies that represent whole sort of cross sections of organisations. And I think we also feel strongly that we as Energy Saving Trust need to play a role in thought leadership and facilitating design. So we run a number of workshops, some with government. We're running workshops, some with local authorities. We've run some focusing on how businesses and SMEs can get involved and play their part. And I think it's really about conversation, bringing people together and solution design. So I absolutely think you're right. Collaboration is the key answer.
Thank you, Jenny, for your talk. I just wanted to ask a question about the kind of impact that you have for your work. And I think a lot of people go into the industry because they want to have these sustainable impacts on the world or society or the region. What does this sort of impact mean to you? And the second question is that something that motivates you to do more in this work, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think having the impact is the biggest motivator beyond anything else. I think if people come to work for different reasons, it's always been for me the impact that my role has. Go to sleep at night and feel like it's making a difference. And I think our organisation has a fantastic impact. We really care about it. It's a really hard place to be to keep proving the impact, because some of the initiatives and work we do does take a long time to kind of ultimately feed through, but some is more immediate. So we do measure impact. We're really keen on measuring the impact which we can track of carbon reduction, so we can see the impact we're having through a number of our areas of work, which is fantastic. We also track the impact of lifetime savings, particularly for those in fuel poverty, which is really fundamental. You can make a massive difference to someone's life if you help improve and upgrade their home, which will make a huge difference. So that really matters. The layer project we're running in Africa, there's a huge impact there. We can see it on sort of local communities where we really do help change lives, which is fantastic. We have a foundation that also delivers lots of projects, and that we can see impact on local communities, on youth projects as well, around people learning and getting really involved and interested in climate change. So these people are going to be advocates for the future. And we also deliver incredible community energy projects where actually, I mentioned there might be whole islands in Scotland where we've had a look at their infrastructure and really enable them to be much more sustainable, as well as lots of other geographies. So I think when you can see a really tangible impact and how you're having that impact on your mission, it just is so rewarding going to work, and that's what really matters to me. Thank you.
I also have a question. Jamie, could you go back to like a few slides ago when they talk about do, don't delegate. Go back. Keep going. Keep going. So this might be like a more personal question, but I think a lot of people that are here probably feel the same way in the sense of we are all people that are proactive. We all came for a reason, and we all want to lead. So, do you have any examples of when you had to do or you had to defer? Because I think a lot of us we would want to do everything. Like as a
Ah,
leader, you would want to be hands-on and you want to do because you feel like you have the skills for it. So there's a lot of things that you don't know when to delegate or when to defer or drop. So like, what is your process like? Do you have any examples of when you've done that?
yeah, great. Thank you for that. So I think the more you kind of develop in your career and become a leader, you can probably do most things that sit across your role. That's just going to be natural. You've built up that knowledge and the skills and experience. So you might look at the whole breadth of your work and think, well, I could do all of this. So the question then is, should I? And I think there's a number of things to consider. So sometimes I might ask somebody to do something that I know that I could do, and I might do it slightly quicker because I've been doing it before. I have the knowledge. But if you stop and take that time to go through that with somebody, so this is what the end product could look like. Up to you how you get there. I'm not going to, set that out. But actually, this is some of what needs to happen, and this is some good examples. One, you've taken the time to show them. It also means that they're learning something. It also means that there's a building of trust there because they're feeling like they're on the receipt of you saying, "I'm trusting you to do this." So that's really important as well. So it's actually really good as a leadership technique and skill to delegate because it helps people feel empowered, which is important. Ultimately, if you take that moment, it might take you slightly longer to explain to someone else. That saves you the time in the future. So it's worth that one-off investment for that to keep working. And actually, probably that person will learn in the same way you did. So it's not going to be perfect first time. You may need to give them some advice or feedback and say, this is perhaps how you could alter it. Again, that's about you giving them proper coaching and learning and development. So that's a really important part of your process. How you make a judgment on whether you should do that, partly you need to think about, am I uniquely placed to do this? When you look at all the things you need to do, the do should be, I'm uniquely placed as a starting point. You might add a few other things into that do list, but the uniquely placed is you're the only one that has the thoughts in your mind that really need to be kind of drawn on to produce whatever you need to produce. Or you're the only one that's been sort of witness to all the different meetings you need to pull together into a summary. No one else could possibly do that because they weren't that person in that right situation. You need to think about what's unique in terms of your input to it. So those are the only things that you can do. But actually, even sometimes if I'm producing sort of a key report, which is a high profile report for our board, I still would get others to do a lot of the pulling together. In fact, I normally kind of give a framework. I spit out of like 6, 7 people and say, could send them a note, could you fill in this bit? It's going to have 7 different voices in it. My bit at the end is going to be sort of bringing it all together. So it kind of sounds like my narrative. It brings out the key points I want to. Maybe that some people have given a bit too much information here, not enough here, and I just question that. But that's a great way of getting others involved, saving you some of that time. But then you're only doing the last bit you need to do. You're not doing the whole thing because you didn't need to. Other people should be involved. So it's about, is it uniquely you? If you delegate it, is that going to be good for the long term for that person and for you for the future and how you make those decisions? And as much as possible, you're going to get to a point where there is only a certain time limit in the day and we all have to set our own professional standards and not work all the hours because otherwise we can't function well. So you're going to realize that something's going to have to go. So then you're going to have to be quite brutal with yourself and say, does this really need me? As much as I'd love to do this, it might be the most fun thing on your list. So if it doesn't uniquely need you and something else does, then you're going to have to make that decision and hand it over.
Thank you very much for everything. It's been super insightful. I'm kind of gonna lead back into kind of the personal career development question as well. So a number of people here are in different stages of their academic life. Some of us are also working professionals, and currently it's also the season where, people are applying for jobs or applying for masters and things like that. And a bit of context as well, London is probably one of the most overqualified, workforce in the world. There are a lot, especially in the sustainability industry. I don't think that people really need more than a bachelor's to actually do an analyst job when they do start out. So for people who are considering, pursuing more academics just so that they can have, their dream job in the industry, what would you say to that? And for career pivoters as well, like for people who haven't been into sustainability but would like to pursue sustainability, is an academic kind of pursuit right choice? Yeah, what are your thoughts? Anything really, just like MBAs or sustainability MBAs are also a thing now.
Yeah, they are. They've grown up, haven't they? So I think there is no perfect answer to this. It's very, very situation dependent. I think you have to be quite guided by the opportunities in front of you. But if an opportunity came up and it was a sort of a dream organisation, but not the dream role, take it as long as it's not going to drive you mad, because it's a chance to get a foot in the door. And I think you can always do study later. So I did my MBA when I was 28. So there is no reason, and actually lots of people do MAs later down the line. So don't feel that you immediately need to go straight into building on sort of academic qualifications to get somewhere, not necessarily. So you can consider that. It might be dream initial role, not the most desirable company. That's fine as well, because then you're getting all the skills and knowledge and experience, and you can just track your path. That's why I talk about career vision. Always be thinking about where am I trying to get to, and is there a good pathway there? Is it these kind of roles or these sectors that then get me where I want to go? So I think that's absolutely legitimate. If you've got a really interest, and I talked on those sort of the slide with the 4 boxes around kind of thinking about your pathway. If you're really interested in Barry being heavily embedded in sort of research and academic research or policy and research, then it's probably more suitable to continue with further academic study if that's your direction of travel. But it's not a must, but I think it's more suitable. So it might be that actually this is the right thing to continue now, particularly if you have a really strong field of study that you can see as being a more and more popular subject in this space, because we're in a place of constant innovation and research. Every day there's something new. So I don't think it in any way harmed, and it feels like quite a lot of focus in the space is on those areas of research and further study. So I think that's fine if that's a pathway to you. But as I say, I think you've got the opportunity to look later down the line as well and do further study. I think there are many organisations now that work in this space. I know, as I said, when we started out, we were one of a handful, I believe. But now there are many, and there are many that kind of really lead more as sort of a digital AI type development organisation that happen to then do work in climate change. So you might not easily find them. You need to kind of quite broad in your searching for roles. There may be some sort of big organisations like us. There's lots of other kind of government body type organisations. There's a lot of roles in those spaces, lots of entry level roles that you could consider. So it's really probably about doing sort of setting your alerts. I don't know if you have alerts on job roles on things like LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever it may be, to consider those opportunities coming up. But I think there isn't one perfect career answer. In fact, there never will be. So I think almost like sort of look for your opportunities. If a role comes up and you think you could take it, it doesn't stop you doing further study, I would go for it. But actually, if you think, no, I'm much more likely to be in an academic vein throughout my career, then that might be worth continuing to pursue that and think about those options.
Thank you so much, Jenny. My question is kind of more about the broader geopolitical landscape, and I think you touched upon the narratives shifting earlier on. So we've seen things happening in the US with knock-on effects in the UK and government priorities shifting towards defense and all of those things, which I think inevitably leads to kind of deprioritization of things like climate change, social impact, sustainability, international aid. So with that subsequently having also knock-on effects on the market and companies and company priorities, and then our careers and opportunities in this space, what kind of advice would you have for people working in this area to maintain that kind of conviction, to have an impact, and to maintain resilience in this career space?
Yeah, it's really important to keep focusing on the impact you're trying to achieve, that end goal in mind, and that, as you say, that resilience. I think there are many people out there that are like-minded, so engage with those people, surround yourself with those people, because I think finding that home with others that feel passionately and equally similarly concerned and energized to do something about it is really helpful. It helps sort of support you and so that's why the networks are key. I mentioned some opportunities for different networks you might want to engage in. So make sure you find that space. I find it comforting to do that. There is some great sources, and whether we can share the links around afterwards, of good news. So there are sites that you can get good news about climate change. There's a lot of good news about climate change, I promise, across the world. I don't think it gets heard enough in the general news because it's not that exciting. It's good news stories, but I think we can find sources of lots and lots of positivity, intelligence, and developments in this space. I think despite the kind of rhetoric from some areas or some countries, I feel really fortunate to be in the UK, to be working with DESMES as we are and other government departments, transport, other areas who are continuing to invest in this. And actually, if you think about kind of the comprehensive spending review, government have still, despite obviously an understandable focus on sort of some of the worldwide events and funding those, and there's still a significant amount of the funding that was asked for by these areas of government they received in the comprehensive spending review, which means they can go ahead with their really detailed plans. There are many plans being rolled out. I think the fact that we've got GB Energy, Great British Energy, is amazing. It's really important as a vehicle for change. That's a real first. What GB Energy has done already has been some really great projects. I think we really need to share more of the good news and those stories about the projects that are happening. We've got plans being rolled out imminently, which are going to make a huge difference across the UK, with a lot of funding to support people, especially those who are most disadvantaged. So I think there's a lot of positivity here. There's lots to come. As I say, I think this government is doing things for the long term in this space, not just the short term. I think that there isn't a uniform view in some parties that oppose net zero. There are still individual leaders in those parties that are in support of net zero and working towards net zero and recognise that it is an issue. So it's not just one view, and that's important. And it's really about actually that kind of focus and positivity. Why? What's your why? Why are you doing this? Why are you working in this space? For anyone that looks up and out and sees what's happening in climate change and the real effects of that across the world all the time, the argument is clear. So it's really about reminding yourself of that purpose. But I think mostly try and engage with those people that are motivated and positive about this, because there are many, many people out there who care deeply and are committed to this work.
Obviously, with sustainability, I think something which is important with sustainability is your stakeholders or your clients. So, for example, like there's been a project of expanding Heathrow with a third runway. So the government, for example, Rachel Reeves is backing up the project, but the people who are living like near the Heathrow runway are opposing the project because their houses are getting like moved out to another place. So like because like these stakeholders have completely different views on the project, and working in sustainability, you'll need to be able to balance and try and satisfy the stakeholders' needs. Or like it's basically like a very important financial term is obviously like the return on the shareholders. So how do you go about like trying to balance the needs of like stakeholders and working in a sustainability industry?
It's definitely challenging, balancing all those different needs. As you say, different stakeholders are driven by different end goals. Some driven more around profitability, making changes in infrastructure, some overarchingly about the impact, as you say. I think one of the big challenges is it's got to be through conversation. We're really lucky as an organisation that we get to go in and talk across industries about what we're trying to achieve and trying to find common ground. Because there's got to be some common ground, quite often there is, that people then will be driven by their own goals. But it's almost talking about how do you minimise and mitigate some of the more, the wider impact. I can't specifically comment on Heathrow itself. That's not an area of infrastructure that we look at. But I do think you're right that you're always going to have those competing priorities. Sometimes it's about actually, what are some of the things that you need to give so you actually win on the bigger challenges. And I think sometimes it's about that sort of negotiating really effectively around, okay, what's your end goal? A good example, we look at this in terms of our organisation. We have really big red lines about who we won't work with, which stakeholders we won't work with, and we won't work with people that deny climate change and the climate crisis, and we won't work with people that kind of act in accordance with sort of behaviours that are going to damage the environment. But there are some organisations, would they be the most desirable organisations that you'd work with, who are purely all about clean energy? Not necessarily, but if we work together, we can achieve a greater good. And I think that's really important. So it's not about being really limited and restrictive and saying, we're only going to work with organisations that can see this impact and this is what we're trying to achieve. You have to acknowledge that other organisations have, as you say, different priorities, different stakeholders that they need to appease. But actually, as long as it's within your boundaries of what you feel is acceptable and you think it's going to make a bigger impact overarchingly towards your mission, then I think it's got to be achieved. And that takes so much diplomacy, delicacy, careful negotiation, and trying to really find, as I say, points of agreement and common ground. But it's hugely complex, and this is something you're going to find as you work your way through your careers.
I think I would have a few questions where I'd be interested to ask you guys, like, what you think was like a key takeaway for you, like in this session. Because I think also be good to, for Jenny to hear that, or like things that you found like interesting, or like you're going to think about a bit more, look into after the session. Anyone want to share?
Should I repeat what I said? I think this image of like, I want to go down this path, although it's still unclear. I think it's just about just kind of asking for more opportunities, as I said, and like even if it's not something that you want, you still, because you know the work can lead up to just trying to make the most out of your experience that you have right now. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways, and I think that's something I can apply to just on a daily basis as well, like being curious as well. So yeah, thank you very much. So that was a big takeaway.
So thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, the part about being prepared to everything that you go on to, and also be super curious on and taking ownership on your thing, a job, but be it very small or very big, it doesn't matter. I think both are like the main takeaway for me. I think very helpful.
Great, thank you.
Who's next?
Thanks, Jenny. I think for me, there was two kind of key takeaways. And as someone who's 3 years into their career, it was just really insightful. So I think the first was the idea of the personal brand at work, because I've thought about that, but I've not actually had like a term to attribute to it. So that was really helpful to kind of frame like how do I want to show up? How do I want others to perceive me? And what does that link to in terms of the work that I do and how I show up on the day-to-day basis. And then I think the other aspect that was really interesting is just the idea of going to companies and people that really interest you and excite you rather than really shooting for a job title or a certain level of seniority, because I think that is the norm that a lot of people talk about. So it was just refreshing to hear actually go to where you're excited, and then you'll be able to grow within that role and within that network. So thank you so much.
Will kind of stick with me was that short example you gave about someone who sent a report to you and asked if you wanted supporting slides, and that idea of going just slightly above and beyond, I think, is something that I'll try and keep in my mind when I work.
I think for